Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Jefferson's Salute to the Presidents. I'm Thomas Watson, and this short little guy is my travel companion, Thomas Jefferson, the most famous bobblehead in the world. On this show, the two of us will pay tribute to the life of our 23rd president, Benjamin Harrison. I'm wearing my All in the Family shirt in honor of Harrison's amazing family. Benjamin's dad, John Scott Harrison, served 4 years in the U.S. House of Representatives. His grandfather, William Henry Harrison, was our ninth president, and Benjamin Harrison V, Ben's great-grandfather, signed the Declaration of Independence in 1776. Not a bad lineage, to say the least. So without further delay, please sit back, maybe grab a bowl of corn mush, a favorite of Harrison's, and enjoy the show. Benjamin Harrison was born on August 20th, 1833, at his grandfather's farmhouse located at this site in North Bend, Ohio. Who was his grandfather? None other than our ninth president, William Henry Harrison. Benjamin was 7 years old when his grandfather was elected president, but he did not attend the inauguration. Benjamin's great-grandfather, also named Benjamin Harrison, signed the Declaration of Independence. When I returned to this site 7 years after my first visit in 2014, the house had been given a makeover, which included the removal of the doorway. While this building was likely not the farmhouse where Harrison was born, it was still an awesome experience for me to stand on the ground where the birthplace once stood. This large crib behind me was used by Benjamin when he was just a baby. Soon after Benjamin's birth, the family settled at the Point, a 600-acre farm given to his father, John Scott Harrison, by John's father, William Henry. The Point was once located at this site, now occupied by the Luminant Miami Fort Power Plant, situated along the shore of the Ohio River. Benjamin grew up at the Point and received his early education at a nearby small log schoolhouse. Even though the Harrisons came from a wealthy lineage, John Scott spent most of his farm income on his children's education instead of living in the lap of luxury. Harrison lived at the Point on and off throughout his college years, which was when he met and married Caroline Scott. Benjamin and his new bride lived together at the Point for only a short time after their marriage. The couple moved out for good in 1854 and headed for Indianapolis. The two-story brick farmhouse known as the Point. The pantry door behind me came from the Harrison's farmhouse, the Point. On October 20th, 1853, 20-year-old Benjamin Harrison married 21-year-old Caroline Scott at the bride's home in Oxford, Ohio. After being admitted to the Ohio bar as a lawyer in 1854, Harrison served in the Civil War from 1862 to 1865. This document was signed by President Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton in March 1865 when Harrison was promoted to Brigadier General following his service in the Civil War. This piece of paper, along with his medal, are on display in Harrison's library and are considered some of Benjamin's most prized possessions. Benjamin Harrison was elected to the United States Senate in 1880 and served a single 6-year term from March 4, 1881 to March 3, 1887. After failing to be re-elected to the Senate in 1886, Harrison was nominated for the presidency in 1888 and went head-to-head against incumbent President Grover Cleveland. After purchasing the property on the outskirts of Indianapolis in 1867, Benjamin Harrison built this lavish 3-story brick home in 1875 and moved there with his wife Caroline. On July 4, 1888, Benjamin Harrison was standing at this location just outside of his parlor when he received the news he had been nominated by the Republican Party as their candidate for president. Throughout the summer of 1888, Benjamin Harrison campaigned from his home. The Republican candidate delivered nearly 100 speeches before thousands of people who had gathered in front of his home. Harrison had revitalized the traditional front porch campaign, even though his elaborate front porch wasn't added to the home until 1896, 3 years after he left office. Although President Cleveland had won the popular vote by slightly over 90,000 votes, Harrison won the Electoral College 233 to 168. Benjamin Harrison recited the presidential oath of office on the east portico of the United States Capitol on March 4, 1889, during a heavy rainstorm. Outgoing President Grover Cleveland held an umbrella over Harrison's head as he recited the oath of office. President Harrison's inaugural address was short. As a matter of fact, it was half the length of his grandfather's address in 1841. Inauguration of Benjamin Harrison, March 4, 1889. Once in the executive mansion, President Harrison went to work to help America's economy by passing the McKinley Tariff Act. But unfortunately, that bill ultimately raised consumer prices. Harrison did sign the Land Revision Act of 1891, which protected over 22 million acres of federal land as national forests. And during his time in office, First Lady Caroline Harrison made numerous improvements to the White House, including the purging of the rat and insect infestation in the mansion. In 1891, the First Lady had electricity installed in the mansion, but she was too afraid to handle the switches. She left the lights on all night and had a building engineer turn them off each morning. First Lady Caroline Harrison. Late 1891, Caroline Harrison was diagnosed with tuberculosis and she convalesced throughout the summer of '92 at a lodge in the Adirondack Mountains. During her absence, daughter Mary Harrison McKee took over the role as White House hostess. When her illness became terminal, Caroline returned to the White House where she passed away on October 25, 1892, just 2 weeks before her husband lost his bid for re-election. Caroline Harrison was the second First Lady to die in the White House. The first was Letitia Tyler, wife of President John Tyler. White House hostess Mary Harrison McKee. 6 new states were admitted to the Union during Harrison's administration, which gave us a total of 44. Those states were North and South Dakota, Montana, and Washington, all in 1889. Idaho and Wyoming joined in 1890. But that wasn't enough, as Harrison still lost the 1892 presidential election to Grover Cleveland by a landslide. Cleveland received 277 electoral votes. Harrison had 145, while Populist Party candidate James B. Weaver snagged 22 electoral votes. After attending the inauguration of Grover Cleveland, Harrison traveled to Chicago for the World's Columbian Exposition before returning to his mansion in Indianapolis. Benjamin Harrison resided in this home for the remainder of his life, with the exception of a few months in 1894 when he lived in San Francisco. In 1896, Harrison actively campaigned for William McKinley and helped him get elected as our 25th president. But that same year, the 62-year-old widower had his eyes focused on someone else besides William McKinley. That's right, the former president began to court Mary Scott Lord Dimmick, a widow who was also the young niece of his first wife, Caroline. The funny thing was, Mary had also lived in the White House during Harrison's administration, as she served as Caroline's assistant. On April 6, 1896, Benjamin Harrison, 62, married 37-year-old Mary Scott Lord Dimmick at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in New York City. Harrison's grown children were horrified that father was marrying a woman nearly half his age, and they refused to attend the ceremony. When Benjamin and Mary weren't traveling, they lived together in this mansion, which Mary turned into the Benjamin Harrison Memorial Home following his death. Let's go through the doorway behind me and visit the place Benjamin Harrison called home for the final 25 years of his life. This is the large front parlor, which was the only room in the home we weren't allowed to step foot in. The reason was because the carpeting was original to the room when Benjamin Harrison lived in the home. I'm standing on the fireplace mantel in the back parlor. It was in this room where Benjamin Harrison accepted his party's nomination as president in 1888. In my mind, Harrison may have been looking at his grandfather's portrait when he said yes. This bookcase in Harrison's library was a beautiful piece of furniture. It turned out German immigrants handcrafted the bookcase in exchange for law advice from Harrison. The oval portrait of Abraham Lincoln, which hung over my left shoulder, was placed above the president's casket when Lincoln laid in state in the Indiana State House on April 30th, 1865. I'm posing on a desk in Harrison's library, and I'm among some of his most cherished collectibles. While most everything in Harrison's kitchen was a period piece, the high chair I'm standing on was original to the home and was used by the president's grandson, Benjamin Harrison McKee. This is the dining room in the Harrison house, and I'm standing alongside Benjamin's original table and chairs. The president sat at the table in the chair beside me, while his first wife, Caroline, sat at the opposite end of the table. While the china was from the period and the food was artificial, the flatware was owned and used by the Harrisons, and the artifact in the center of the table was Harrison's silver and crystal pickle jar. While in the dining room, I took a moment to pose near Caroline Harrison's china cabinet. Benjamin Harrison was a huge admirer of Abraham Lincoln, which was the reason some of Lincoln's White House china had found a home in Caroline's cabinet. Caroline Harrison used Lincoln's dinnerware as an inspiration when she designed the White House china for her husband's administration. In the second floor sitting room, I had the honor of standing alongside one of Caroline Harrison's fans made of ostrich feathers. Situated in the corner was Caroline's easel and one of her hundreds of paintings located throughout the home. The highlight for me was when I posed in Benjamin Harrison's second floor master bedroom. Across the room from the bed was Benjamin Harrison's dresser, along with some of his personal hygiene supplies. I wondered if the whisk broom was to brush cherry pie crumbs out of his beard. On the opposite side of the room from the dresser was Harrison's fitness equipment. The president supposedly used the dumbbells, war clubs, and weights to stay fit. In early March of 1901, Benjamin Harrison came down with a severe bout of influenza, which quickly developed into pneumonia. The former president failed to respond to vapor inhalation and other treatment and steadily declined. On March 12th, Harrison said, "Are the doctors here? Doctor, my lungs." Soon after, Harrison lapsed into unconsciousness without uttering another word. At 4:45 p.m. on March 13th, 1901, President Benjamin Harrison died in this bed at the age of 67. When I stood on this small table near Harrison's bed, I envisioned the president's family seated around the room in a solemn vigil during Benjamin Harrison's final moments. Following President Harrison's death, his casket was placed in the front parlor for a day of mourning for friends and family. Family and friends as they mourned the president in the front parlor. On March 16, 1901, Harrison's body lay in state at the Indiana State House in Indianapolis. Funeral services were conducted the following day at the First Presbyterian Church, which was followed by burial services at Crown Hill Cemetery. On March 17, 1901, President Benjamin Harrison's remains arrived at Crown Hill Cemetery, where he was laid to rest alongside his first wife, Caroline. The granite monument behind me marks the Harrison family plot at Crown Hill Cemetery. I'm standing on the grave of President Harrison. To my left was where First Lady Caroline Scott Harrison was laid to rest. The grave to my right was where Mary Dimmick Harrison was laid to rest following her death on January 5th, 1948. And the grave of the president's son, Russell B. Harrison, is in the foreground. Russell died of a heart attack at age 82 on December 13th, 1936. When I stood on Benjamin Harrison's grave during my first visit in 2014, my ponytail mysteriously fell off and landed in the vegetation which covered the plot. It wasn't the first nor the last time I had lost a body part at the grave of a president. Well, that's it for another show. TJ and I hope you learned a little bit about President Benjamin Harrison, who certainly became a Cleveland sandwich. Please do us a favor and subscribe to our channel and hit that like button below. And if you don't mind, please share our channel with your friends on social media. If you want to see more photos and read more detailed stories about our travels around our great country, please check out my blog at eyesofjefferson.com. Our next show will focus on the life of our 25th president, William McKinley. This will be another episode you won't want to miss. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Jefferson's Salute to the Presidents. So long.